paragraphs on the conditions of anonymity, and that you have to record. You cannot do a narrative without getting either verbal consent or written consent. Now, the argument which you will ask me is that, and which I have actually myself also done, is many a times we get nothing, either verbal consent or written consent, but we cannot skip that data which we are finding on the field. Then how do we factor in that into a narrative analysis? That time, what you should do is you should put them into your diary observations. But you cannot say that those are narratives, those are diary observations. That is why I told that when we start doing the narrative analysis, we do narrative analysis of the recorded conversations, out of which you bring out transcribe. Transcribe is verbatim, आप उसको लिखना शुरू करते हैं, what it told. And then we have these diary conversations, which basically give us the background. It serves two purposes. Sometimes we scribble on our diaries the background, what was the location within which that event was happening, because when the person is recording the data, you are busy writing, and that becomes important. Now, what happens is many qualitative researches is that we get to review certain papers where, I mean, it's a bit funny, but it is important here to be mentioned that people give us interview bites as if qualitative research, the reader is dying to have some interviews, which is not. And it has completely got no context. They just put hello, hi, and yes, did you feel good? How are you feeling? Something very predictable. So that those are very evidently cooked up interviews. It becomes very predictable that ये narrative actually लिया नहीं गया है, ये बनाया गया है. And that happens when people start adopting shortcuts for qualitative research, or you try to bring, or you want to write a journal paper where you have a general idea. So I would say that when you do this, it is better that do even suppose there is a certain topic which you are very aware of, but at least you go for some narratives, do a good narrative analysis. And then what happens is, apart from giving the interview bite, that paragraph is succeeded by an analytical paragraph where you pick up terms from there and contextualize to the events which is happening. Now, how do we do that? Number one, step one of narrative analysis is that, number one, start transcribing your data. Now, there's no rocket science in it. You have got softwares available. If you have really done the recording properly, there are even softwares, and you paid softwares are there. If you put the file on, then they even they translate the Hindi into English. But as usual, lot of meaning is lost in translation. So it's better that we still will ask that we should go for the normal, technical aspect of doing the transcript. Maybe you can feed on your transcript into the system like NVivo or others to get your coding later. But first thing is, to the old school, stick to the old school and just start transcribing your data. So every word that is, so if there is a pause, you write a ... If there is something told, you have to write, and later you might take it off. But at that time, just without having any value judgments or anything in your mind, just start transcribing the data as it is. The second part is, without coding, start reviewing the material, that is reading and rereading it again, because you know the topic within which you are doing. Because when you start reviewing the material, you exactly start understanding, or you get an idea as to what kind of a code do you want to develop. Because otherwise you will not get the code. You cannot have the code from the beginning and then start transcribing. Like many a times I see researchers, they write the research question and then they do the literature survey, which is foolish and very comical. That ideally the research question should emanate from the review of literature, not the other way around. So it is putting the horse before the cart, that this is my research question. Whatsoever the literature says, I don't care about it, but this has to be done, and so this is the literature. So don't do that. Go for the transcribe and only then code. No need to premeditate the codes. Let the transcript speak for itself. Now, how do we do the first one? This is some guidance. So what you do is add to each transcript notes about dynamics of the interview. When I say, so you do the transcript, so there is one right-hand side column should be there where you put your remarks. So you can say that when this was going on, what was exactly happening on the background, whether the person was nervous, if something interesting has happened, put those things on the side row of the transcript. Then you record the key details, the time and the place. That is very important. You don't find it important when you do it, but when you write your paper later, you really find it very important, because then you can correlate things. And that gives, and many a times, it gives you a lot of details which we feel is irrelevant, but for the reader, it becomes much more important, because certain things we take for granted when we do it. So do record the details. Then anonymize material at this stage. That means if there is a person called Badal Singh who has told you cannot write Badal Singh, you have to write Ram or something else, which is a different name. And then you have to keep your code somewhere else, who is meant by what. So that in case your transcript goes to somebody, it cannot be misused against someone. Then use wide margins and line numbers. And why line numbers are important is that later when you do that table of coding, you can refer to which line number which is happening. Or we can say that this word has been repeated in a span of 4 sentences or 3 lines, something of that sort you can say in your analysis part. So you transcribe word for word, include ums, ers, and pauses. They are important guides to the meaning of what is being said. So if there is a and a, that means there is a hesitation, or there is something which the respondent was not very sure of, or maybe the respondent was nervous to say, or maybe the respondent was plainly fooling. That you will get to know eventually when you triangulate your data. कहीं और सा वही चीज को पता चलेगा, लेकिन उस टाइम पे अगर आपने उसको नोट नहीं किया होगा, तो आप अपने डिस्क्रिप्शन में बाद में नहीं लिख सकते हैं कि ये जो दिस पर्सन वाज नर्वस बिकॉज शी पॉज्ड, and however, similarly, when I cross-checked this data with officer, it was found to be false, or something of that sort. So those pauses are very important when you take a note of that. Include stylistic devices to indicate emphasis or anger, speaking loudly, etc. Many a time, some of our most Indian scholars, including myself, 10 years down the line before I went to the UK, was that I used to think that giving these unnecessary details like whether the respondent was speaking loudly or shoutingly, what was rubbish. But it is not so. The purpose of a graphic narrative analysis is, it should be, the basic purpose is to, number one, you are not telling us such data which is available in newspapers. That's the best test of your data. कि ये तो अखबार पढ़ के भी हमें पता था, नहीं वहीं से पता चल जाती, इतना तो अखबार पढ़ के भी पता चल जाता है, आपका पेपर क्यों पढ़ेंगे हम. Second thing is that when you add these things, it almost transports the reader into the field, and it makes the narrative very realistic. So that empathy will start coming with the reader, and it has an impact. But आप वो impact देने के लिए नहीं दे सकते कि हमने ऐसे सुना, recording कर दिया और फिर छूट मुड़ कर loudly shoutingly लिख दिया. It doesn't come. The moment you have taken it impromptu, the natural flair will come in the writing. So that I've seen myself both ways. I used to insert randomly at a certain stage of my career. It reaped no benefit. Then I was more diligent to my work, and it did reap benefits. Then you should record additional notes in the parenthesis. Now this is more important, to indicate tone or voice or speaking in jest or irony. Now, why that is important is that makes us aware. I mean, the reader is made aware that in the presence of which other people has this person told in which manner. So what you say is as much important in where you say, because the same person might have interviewed 3 different places, alone, in a group, or in an event, and the presentation style changes. And that can only be captured provided you are vigilant enough to put down in those parentheses these kind of remarks. So just to summarize this slide, A, put down things verbatim. 2, have a side column to put your remarks about the situation, about the mode of reflection that the speaker is using, and of course, if at all there is something happening in the background, that one can be taken up. Then step 2, how do you review the material? Now, this is very important that you have to do it case by case basis. Now, here the word case does not mean case study. Here the case means stakeholder type. So you should review all your, suppose you are doing a study on, say, impact of rural development schemes, for instance. So you have 3 segments. You have the agricultural development schemes. So you have the farmers, you have the middlemen, who are the people who are trying to market the product, and of course officers. Then there would be this panchayat officials. So you should do the transcribing of all the farmers at one go, then the second category, that is meant by proceed on a case by case basis. Why?